Well, this week marks 50 years since Uganda's former president, Idi Amin, expelled tens of thousands of Asians from the East African country. It was one of his most controversial policies, and it left a lasting impact on Uganda, as well as on those who were forced out. In a moment, we'll speak to Noreen Nasim, who wrote about her father's experience after he was forced to leave. But first, Mohammed Walji takes a look at Uganda's former president, his brutal 8-year rule, and his decision to force an entire ethnic community out of Uganda.
His Excellency, President for Life, Field Marshal Al-Haji Dr. Idi Amin. And that's not even the full title Uganda's former president bestowed upon himself. In 1971, Idi Amin ousted his former ally, Milton Obote, in a military coup. Initially, the new leader's arrival was met with jubilation. Soon that changed as Amin's ruthless brutality became apparent. Over 8 years, the president eliminated any who opposed him. By the end of his reign, around 300,000 civilians had been killed at the hands of a man who came to be known as the Butcher of Uganda.
He could sometimes come to witness the tortures and also participate, because there are some people who he wanted to see really if they have been tortured and killed. That was his passion. He could enjoy seeing people suffer.
Amin's presidency was filled with controversial policies, none more so than his decision to expel Uganda's Asian population. Despite making up only 1% of the country, they were responsible for around 20% of the national income. But Amin didn't see them as beneficial to his nation. In fact, he accused them of being disloyal and sabotaging the economy.
The Uganda is still not yet independent. Uganda will be independent after this, my decision, after I want to see that the whole Kampala street is not full of Indians. It must be proper black, and administration in those shops is run by the Ugandans.
Many had spent their lives building successful businesses. Amin gave them just 3 months to leave. In an instant, an entire community lost everything.
We leave house just like this and we ran away, only one suitcase. We kept our house and so when we come just
You've left everything behind?
Everything behind. And we come only one suitcase.
Many of the 80,000 forced to flee ended up in the UK and prospered, but Uganda's economy did not. In the 3 years following their departure, GDP fell 5% and inflation rose rapidly. The president's mismanagement was bringing the economy to the verge of collapse, but it was his decision to attack Tanzania that ultimately brought him down. Amin ordered his forces to invade. They failed. Soon, Tanzanian troops were closing in on Kampala, and Amin quickly fled. His departure was met just like his arrival, with Ugandans celebrating on the streets. Mohammed Walji, The Newsmakers.
So let's cross now to Sheffield in the UK, where I am joined by Noreen Nasim. She's authored the book, Expelled from Uganda, which is the story of a man who was forced out of the East African nation. That man was her very own father. Noreen, thanks so much for being with us. You wrote a novel, an entire novel about your father's experience, being forced out of his home country that was Uganda. Tell us, what was it about his experience in Uganda that was just so compelling for you to produce your first novel about it?
You know, it was actually a documentary that I'd watched that had triggered my initial questioning, because Dad's always been like a Pandora's box. He's never spoken about his experiences. And when I asked him and sort of said, Dad, tell me about how it made you feel. I know what happened, but how did it make you feel? What did you go through? That was when he fully opened up and said, you know, what is it that you want to know? And I'm ready to talk about it. And he was only 19 at the time. In 1972, Idi Amin put out this expulsion order. And as a 19-year-old, he wasn't quite sure what to make of it. But, you know, watching all these harrowing sort of events unfold around him, was quite scary. At the age of 19, he was watching his family pack his bags and leave. Everybody was given 90 days to just flee this country. And the sad part of it was that a lot of people were facing a lot of difficulties even before that 90-day period had expired. People were sort of subjected to looting, there were burglaries, there were robberies. They were being held at checkpoints just on the way to the airport and being looted. So even just getting to the airport itself
Right.
was quite a difficult journey.
The discrimination, by all accounts, was becoming extremely and dangerously evident. But let me ask you this, for people like your father, was Uganda just a place to live and prosper for the Asian community, or was there actually an attachment to the land and to the country? Because Idi Amin portrayed it that, you know, Asians had only come, as he said, to milk the cow dry.
Absolutely, yes. So that's a very famous sort of line that Idi Amin has sort of said. And the thing is, the Indians did come sort of initially to build railways, and they settled there. And there was so many sort of generations on. My father was sort of third generation that was living, that was born in Africa. He was born in Uganda. Uganda was his homeland. It was, to him, that was home. He knew nothing else. So the attachment was very, very, sort of precious to the Indians. They loved Uganda, and still to this day, they crave going back and sort of visiting, because that was their homeland. It was everything they knew.
Right. Do you think, though, I mean, according to Idi Amin's accusations, that more effort could have been made among the Asian community to mix with the local community in Uganda? Because the Indian and South Asian, there's another argument here, also arguably paid the ultimate price for British policies that favored them specifically and their education also over native Ugandans.
I think that can be argued, yes, to some degree. There was segregation. I think if we sort of sit back and, sort of ignore that, it wouldn't be right. We need to address the fact that, yes, there was segregation. It did occur. There were certain sort of people within the community that didn't want to perhaps mix. But then on the flip side, there were so many families that did integrate, that, were very much a part of native Ugandan lives. And there were a lot of sort of interracial marriages as well. So there were community, parts of the community that did integrate very, very well. But equally so, there were many that perhaps didn't. So yes, it could be argued.
Right. It's interesting because many immigrant communities all around the world, it's just normal for them to gravitate toward each other. They have common culture, common, language, historical background. So it's hard to really criticize a community for being what some others might see as exclusive, when that is just normal human behavior. But one final question for you. When the South Asian minorities were actually threatened in Uganda, yes, some had UK citizenship and other citizenships, but thousands actually held Ugandan citizenship and were helped by nations like Canada, who accepted upwards of 5,000 Ugandan nationals of South Asian descent. Do you think the same would happen today, given the global context?
I think given the context now, I don't think it would, and it's quite sad. I think the amount of help that is given to refugees nowadays, it's just lowering. It's quite sad, because I think we're seeing a different side to how refugees are portrayed, how refugees are helped. The amount of sort of compassion, I think, that is out there, unfortunately, I personally feel is on the decrease. However, that's not to say there are still countries that will step forward and that will help. But I still think that there is a lot of perhaps difference in the sense of how different communities are portrayed, depending on which countries they're actually coming from as well. And I think that is very much at the centre now of our news, what we're seeing, how refugees from different areas of the world are being portrayed, and based on that portrayal, how they're being helped. So no, I don't think if it did occur in this day and age, I don't think the Ugandan community would have been as lucky to have received the help, that they had back then.
Noreen Nasim, thank you so much. Really so great to have you. So unfortunately, we're out of time for this segment in the Newsmakers. Thanks again for being with us. Our viewers, of course, for being with us as well. Remember to follow us on Twitter @_newsmakers and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.